February has arrived. Spring training baseball will be on us soon. Now we have to ask, what do we have to look forward to at the Guardians roster after a quiet offseason, and why being down on Travis Bazzana doesn't make sense?
Tanner Bobby of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cleveland Guardians baseball will be played this month. So will college baseball before that. We've made it. We are into baseball season officially in some form or fashion. As I'm sitting here wearing a winter hat. If you're watching on YouTube, it's still cold, but baseball is still coming. We promise. Thanks for tuning in, Guardians fans. Thanks for hanging out with us. We are back to 5 days a week here on your favorite half hour of the day. Locked On Guardians, the only daily podcast that covers your Cleveland Guardians every single day, from the majors, the minors, the draft, everything in between. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the number one sports podcast network. I am Justin Lada, one of your two co-hosts here for the last 4 years and counting, with my friend and coach Jeff Ellis, and starting my 19th year covering the Guardians minor league system as a prospect writer and editor.
As he said, I am Jeff Ellis. I've been here since Locked On expanded into baseball. Before that, I was a national writer at Scouting 24/7, focused on prospects in the draft. I want to thank you for making today's episode your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. A big shout out to all of our everydayers. I haven't done it in a while. Community Spotlight featured this week on YouTube. John Fagan, Stephen Matthews, Tim Metavelis, Corey Treharn, and Evan Walter, who they decided to focus on as our Community Spotlight. I don't know how YouTube chooses those, but thank you to them and everyone else who is one of our everydayers.
Yes, we appreciate all of you for being here with us every single day, talking Guardians baseball. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here without you. So we appreciate
100%.
it. Yes. On today's show, we'll talk about what to look forward to in spring training after a quiet offseason for the Guardians. We'll talk about some of the non-roster invitees we are excited to talk about later or see this year. We'll also talk about some of the bats that have come off the market this weekend, as well as Brendan Donovan, and whether or not that is still realistic. And later in today's show, we'll talk about why people overreacting to Travis Bazzana's 2025 season is a mistake, and anybody being down on him, we just do not understand. So stick around for that later on today. Today's episode, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you are a new customer of FanDuel, bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets if you win. There's a lot of funny props you can bet on in FanDuel to start the game. So if you get a quick $5 one, and you can make some money out of that if you're into that sort of thing. So I'm sure people are excited about the Super Bowl, but people who are here, they are more excited about Guardians baseball. And I think the question is, besides the bullpen, which, let's be honest, they did a great job of, I think, making sure they piece that together. We'll see what happens, because you never know with bullpens. Like, I'm excited for Sean Armstrong. I think that'll be a great addition to the bullpen, and they did a good job as far as adding depth guys like Peyton Pellett and Connor Brogdon and Colin Holderman. But outside of that, there has not really been a whole lot of reason to get excited about the Guardians roster, at least in terms of what we would say are additions, upgrades, fixes. So with spring training, coming up, I know some players are going to be in Arizona this week, and officially this time next week, pitchers and catchers will be there. What do we have to look forward to coming into the year? Because it's, they're coming off a back-to-back division title season, but offensively, they acknowledged at the end of the season press conference, they've said it over and over. We know our offense wasn't good enough. We know our outfield has not met expectations. They say that, but nothing has changed, at least on paper.
Yeah, nothing has. I think we can do enough reading between the lines to see that what they were looking for was very specifically one thing, and that was a right-handed outfield bat. Maybe, I know people hate the word platoon, but that's what they were looking for, someone who could be in that situation. And while I think, you and I discussed this off air, and I think it's, something we can you wouldn't be opposed to me sharing. It's like we both kind of came to the conclusion we couldn't get too upset with free agency, because Austin Hayes thinks he can start, and the White Sox are willing to pay him to see if he can generate a trade asset, right? And they're going to give him that opportunity. Rob Refsnyder didn't want to come to Cleveland, just full stop. That didn't work out for them. The bigger problem, though, is if this is the issue, Dane Myers didn't go for much. He would have been perfect in that role. Like, strong defender, a lot of other things. One call, that's all to the Dodgers. See if they're willing to move Alex Call. If you're a Milwaukee person, you get that reference. But they needed to do something externally. Heck, try to get Call and Ryan Earhart, so you can get the next generation of platoon bat while you're at it for a particular piece. Like, there's still needs to be ways to go about it. You can't just go in with we got Nolan Jones, and he occasionally was the guy we put out against a platoon a year ago. It's like that doesn't work. If you're going to try, I'll be very curious to see. I got to be honest. I don't expect Martinez to keep up what he did a year ago as a platoon bat. I don't. And you didn't do. Yes, David Fry is going to come back, and that's great. But Fry and Martinez can't really be the answer. And we know they've spent some time trying to add pieces, talking to guys. Austin Hayes turned them down, right? It's like they know it's an issue as well. So they need. There's still time. I'm not going to sit back and be like, yep, everyone out there knows me. I'm very slow to rage, but like it feels like if they kind of show up with this expectation, you're betting a lot on two guys who can never staying healthy. And as much as I believe in the young players, got to be honest, young player success rate, you're probably lucky if it's 50-50.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially when you're talking about two guys that are constantly hurt. That's the hard part about it is, we're not even talking about CJ Kafis in there, who, the way things are shaking out, you're probably going to have on the roster at this point, right? Because you're going to have Valera in the outfield, possibly in right field, and DeLauter in center. So that leaves at bats open at DH between Manzardo and Fry, and, getting Jose some reps at DH just to keep him fresh. That leaves it open for, CJ Kafis to make the roster, which, I guess if you look at it the way you were just talking about being at 50-50, then I guess if you throw 3 or 4 guys out there, then that means 2 out of 4 hit. The thing I'm most interested to see, I will say, I know not everyone's going to get excited about this, and we always, caution ourselves and other people to say, like, okay, when they're talking about something, that's fine, but watch what they do. One of the quotes, though, I am watching to see how they react, how they actually follow through on it, was Stephen Vogt talking about how Gabriel Arias will move around, and we expect Rocchio to get the bulk of reps.
Doesn't make sense to me.
I'm with you there, to be honest with you, but that to me leaves the door open for Juan Brio, which is fine. Like I want to see Juan Brio. I think they need to see Juan Brio. We talked about this before with Travis Bazzana, who we'll talk more about later on in the show. That's fine, but I don't know. Maybe it can. I mean, I guess there's a world where it can work, but it's not as exciting, or it's not as guaranteed as a lineup where you open up with Valera and DeLauter and Rocchio and Brito and Kafis. Like, that's, yes, you're getting prospects, you're getting looks at young players, which we talked about for years having to do, but you're banking on a pitching staff that should be pretty good, right? We think the rotation should be pretty good. The bullpen should be solid to good. And you've got Jose Ramirez, of course. And you're surrounding him with, guys that you're like, okay, they're interesting. They're good prospects if they can stay healthy, or we'll want to get a look at them. And you're coming off back-to-back division titles. Like, it seems like you're not all in. You're just kind of, I don't want to say you're putting one foot in, one foot out, because I understand trying to put together your next core and trying to build that and figure out what you have. But at the same time, like, you also have to find some more guaranteed pieces, so that way you're not, like you said, relying on all those young guys when you might have a lower hit rate.
Yeah, it's, and I feel like the ghost in the room is the TV contract situation, just how much that has changed, shifted, and affected things. I can't wait to see next year when Atlanta releases their monetary information, because that's going to give us, we'll finally know, because now they're going to be on the same deal. They are. Okay. Because that's essentially everyone is. I don't think anyone has, I haven't heard anything, comment below if I'm wrong. I could easily be wrong. I don't think anyone's gone back. Atlanta in a year is going to give us all the information we need to know. I think that for the longest time, the TV contract is more important than anything else. And because of the collapse of that, and because you have teams like the Dodgers and the Blue Jays who can cheat the system, and hey, look at the two teams that can cheat the system, are the ones who spent the most in free agency. That's not a surprise with their TV contracts. it just sets up this whole situation. And yeah, but I agree. You can't just sit back and hope. There's so many concerns and so many like red flags for why Martinez and why Fry could regress. And if those two both regress, then you're still up, a creek without a paddle.
Yeah, we'll talk more about what we're excited about in spring training, what we're worried about as that comes this month. We'll talk about some non-roster invitees and some other moves the Guardians did not make on the rest of today's Locked On Guardians. Believe it or not, it is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure that you are right in the middle of the action. The special offer just you're back in the favorite, which is the Seahawks by 4.5, riding with the underdog or building one last same game parlay. This is the game everyone's been waiting for. As for the Guardians, minus 320 to win the division. The Tigers are minus 160. So that's despite the fact that the Guardians didn't do a whole lot this offseason. So you can look at that as glass half full or glass half empty. They're still that close, or that they were that close and didn't do much more. If you're a new customer, bet just $5. Get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60, visit FanDuel. Thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen. As always, we appreciate you being here with us and making us part of your routine to talk Guardians baseball with. If you're already living with the Guardians every day here on February 1st, we know maybe some people are tuning back in because they know baseball's coming this month. Check out the Everydayer Club. Take your fandom up a level, go ad-free. The Everydayer Club allows you to listen to Locked On Guardians with no interruptions, and it gives you members-only Discord access to talk to us, other baseball fans, other Guardians fans, other teams that you really follow on the Locked On Discord network. $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to LockedOnGuardians.supercast.com. Check the link in the show notes to learn a little bit more. I feel really in between. Like, I'm not in between, because I think all offseason you and I have done a good job to acknowledge that, yes, this is still a good team that has potential and hope. They have won back-to-back division titles. The rotation's very solid. Could be better. And it might be better in terms of, Bidey being more consistent this year and Williams building off of last year. And you and I have always liked Joey Cantillo. And they did make the necessary moves in the bullpen this offseason. I think, they needed to go out and get a guy like Sean Armstrong. It was one of the guys you and I put on our list back in November. So they're still a solid team, because one of the comments we get a lot and I see from other people is oh, hey, the White Sox are having a great offseason. It's okay, great. They signed Austin Hayes, who wanted to get 500 at-bats in Chicago or play every day until he got traded to a contender. And then they signed Murakami, which is great. Murakami is a great signing for a team that is not a contender, because he could change them a little bit. If it works out good for them, then boom, he elevates them. But
or he's a great trade asset in that regard.
He's a great trade asset. And he's also betting on himself, because he took a shorter deal, because his market wasn't very big, because people had, rightful concerns about him. It was kind of a good upside play for both of them. I'm not saying the Guardians shouldn't be invested in upside plays, but the White Sox are a team that's perpetually last in the division. As soon as April gets here, they're going to be eliminated from the division, from the playoff race. We don't have to think about them as far as a playoff team this year. So that's great that they're having this offseason that makes a lot of sense. They just went out and bought a prospect from the Red Sox and David Sandlin and paid for Jordan Hicks. And if he works out good for them, then they can trade him. We'll see. That's the kind of stuff the White Sox should do, because they're a last place team. And as frustrated as we are at the Guardians, this is not to say we shouldn't be upset or we shouldn't be a little less than enthused about the fact that they weren't able to add to the team this offseason in terms of offense, but they're still a team that's a division contender, right? This is still a team I think we should expect to win 85 to 90 games and still contend for the AL Central. I know people are going to say, well, the AL Central is small potatoes and who cares? Again, 6 months of baseball, you still got to be good and get in. So the White Sox, yeah, they're having a decent offseason, but they're trying to catch up to a team that that consistently wins, over 80, over 55% of its games, when the White Sox haven't been relevant since like 2005.
Yeah, the White Sox are currently having a feud with Frank Thomas, one of their all-time great players, who,
that's good.
Who just tweeted them about how they didn't include him in their Black History Great Moments tweet. They did not include Frank Thomas.
That feels like an unforced error. Jeez.
No, it was intentionally forced. There's been issues there since their team doctors misdiagnosed an injury and then caused him to get hurt. And then he was let go. And he had some great years with Oakland. I was just looking at today because of the situation. And it's fascinating how well he did after he left. Just a great player. But yeah, the White Sox, by the way, still have Andrew Benintendi, largest contract in team history. You've now got Jimenez and two Jose extensions bigger than that. And I want to say this. I think the White Sox are absolutely making all the right calls right now. I think they are doing a good job this offseason. They have a low payroll. They can go out and make these gambles. You're hoping to flip guys for, if you can get Jordan Hicks back to being a solid reliever, not only will they have gotten a prospect for him, but then they'll be able to trade him because Boston ate some of his salary. Like, it's a logical play. All of this, I think, I don't want to denigrate what they're doing there. I think they're doing a good job. But if you are a baseball fan, you got to be happier with Cleveland as a Cleveland fan, because not only has Cleveland won the division 2 years in a row by Kylie McDaniel and Keith Law, which, Law's rankings we're not going to touch on, but Kylie had some interesting rankings as well. And Kylie's rankings are one of the three that they use to determine PPI picks. So Major League Baseball values Kylie's rankings. It's Baseball America, Kylie's, and MLB's. Kylie is the second, maybe the third best. Like, we're talking about, so not only are the White Sox a worst team, but they also don't have as good of a minor leagues as Cleveland does right now by the people who get paid to do that. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's not been a frustrating offseason. It has been. And again, I'll go back to what I talked about in the first segment, which is when Austin Hayes says, no, I want to be a full-time player. And they rightfully, like, he's a 1.1 win player a year ago, because he's not a great defender. He can't hit velocity at all, but he does crush lefties. And the thing with this front office is they're not going to, I know there's people like, well, just say he is, then don't do it. This front office operates on.
He also knows, like, you can say that, but the agent's going to be able to tell you.
Like, I know, but it's also like there are orgs who will pull junk like that. Cleveland's organization at every year is like, I know people always like to complain about it. It's a Mickey Mouse org and things like that. When the Athletic polls players around baseball, Cleveland's organization is always considered one of the 5 best organizations in baseball because they win and because how they treat their players and how honest and upfront they are. And you and I have heard that from players that, like, it's kind of refreshing how they treat players here. If someone wants to do something different, they let them. I'm going to get myself in trouble. But, back in the day, for instance, when they got Trevor Bauer and he was bounced around from Arizona, we're not going to get into anything after he left here. But, like, Cleveland's like, okay, go do your long toss. We don't care. Like, they're open to ideas. They will let players come and play here. They will, try to help them. They've had guys who have been kind of uncoachable for a few years and then had breakthroughs once they accepted the coaching. They've been very good about helping players level up. And guys know that. So they weren't going to lie. But if all of this comes back to the point, if that isn't working, if the guys you're chasing isn't happening, then you need to find another way. And that's what we've yet to see this offseason. There's still time, and they've done a lot of work late. We had the emergency Jake Junis podcast last year in February. So it's like there's still a chance to see something. But I do think you just can't go into this offseason saying, hey, if you're going to run platoons, Angel Martinez and David Fry are going to stand up. Listen, I was the leader of the Stuart Fairchild bandwagon in his draft year, 100%. At Carter Kaboom as well. Both of those guys, apparently they went back and read my old scouting reports. I had first round grades on both of these guys. I'm like, but guys, that was a while ago. But they're collecting all of my players that I consider misses because I was very high on them.
Right.
And then putting them here. I mean, I was probably too high on Martinez, honestly, a few years ago. So I wish they'd have less faith in my old scouting reports. Really, guys, stop having so much faith in my old scouting reports.
That or send you the paychecks everyone thinks you're getting from the Dolans, right?
I guess, yeah.
One of the two. Either stop taking those seriously,
or actually, let me benefit from everyone saying that I'm in their hip pocket
on the Dolans payroll, right? Yeah. They're willing to let you do whatever you want until you throw a baseball over the center field wall, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Like you can't force teams to trade with you, and it's very clear they have a good farm system. I hate to say it. Like, I know they were sitting there saying like, oh, we had the money to sign guys. And I do believe like they weren't shut out of the Austin Hayes sweepstakes because of money. It really was playing time.
Yeah.
So I do believe that. Yeah. But at a certain extent, there might have been a money issue too, because like, yes, I do believe that a platoon fit was probably the best upgrade they could make, considering you do want to make sure that you have some runway for a guy like, Chase DeLauter or CJ Kafis, and leave room for other guys this year, because that's where you should go. But I think some of that too is because of the TV deal and because of all the money there. Their payroll right now with the White Sox, unfortunately, signing Austin Hayes. I think the Guardians are last in payroll this year at this point, and that doesn't even include, I think, Clase and Luis Ortiz makes under $1 million. But when they come off the books, which I think they will, which they don't know yet, but I think it will at some point, it takes you down even further. And they keep saying, well, we have money, we have the financial wherewithal to make upgrades at the deadline if they become available, which they certainly could. But you're banking on a lot of young guys to get there and make it worth your while. All right, so there's still Eugenio Suarez. I know Jeff and I want to talk about just a little bit, and some non-roster invitees we're excited about. And there's a lot of people out there who are dogging Travis Bazzana and talking about how they're disappointed in the Guardians picking him. And we're going to talk about why that makes absolutely no sense in just a little bit. Well, the Guardians, again, been a silent offseason for the most part. But hit the bell on YouTube. You'll get notified of when our episodes go live 5 days a week now, starting today. And you'll get reaction videos to any news that does happen. Prospect content, we put it out as well all season long. And make sure you're auto-downloading on any audio platform out there so the show comes right into your feed. And when you're ready for 5 days a week of Guardians baseball talk, we will be there for you. What's the theme from Friends? If it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, and even your year, we'll be there. Shout out to Troy for that one. Yeah, so really quickly, Eugenio Suarez. So $15 million. I got to be honest, I don't think the Guardians were actually in on Eugenio Suarez at all. I don't think there was any back and forth from them. It sounded like the Reds and the Pirates were kind of the last people in on Suarez. Even the Mariners didn't consider reunion with him. I don't know. The Guardians would have committed $15 million to him. I would like to think they would. That might be a little bit of an overpay for him, I think. But then again, Luis Arraez got $12 million, and I don't think Luis Arraez is anything like he used to be. That being said, the Reds are going to use him as a DH/first baseman/third baseman, which is exactly the role we would be. A great DH who could fill in at first and fill in at third on occasion. Would have been a good fit in Cleveland, but I don't think there was ever any interest on their part. The other thing too, the Brendan Donovan thing, like Brendan Donovan was one of the guys that they were interested in. Probably the Giants are out on him now, and I just don't think Brendan Donovan is a guy that's going to come to Cleveland just because he's left-handed. Like, I think as much as I still think I would do it because he's an upgrade, I kind of feel like they're out on Brendan Donovan because he's left-handed and they don't want to overpay. Like the Austin Hayes thing too. Like, I know some people I also saw were like, oh, just give him more money than the White Sox and tell him to, hey, we're giving more money to platoon. It's like, okay, you're not going to pay full price. You're not going to pay a Lexus price for a Honda just because the Lexus is not available, but you still need a car. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to pay the same price.
And it also, for a player like Hayes, like, he's not, if he does that, then he's cementing a pathway for himself to being a part-time player. And then it means less money in the long term. So while he's young, while he still feels he has some opportunities, like, can he turn around? Can he have a breakout year and then get a ton of money? Yeah, I mean, that's what I think he's going for as well. Like, it's harder to get a player, even if you were to offer him, multiple million more to get that situation. And I agree. The Suarez one just feels like the biggest miss. There's massive decline. Like, I'm not going to lie. There is massive decline in his data. There's a lot of things that are going not well there, but bottom line, you can be successful if you hit the ball hard and you barrel, and he still was doing both of those things, even with his decline. I am not so concerned in a 1-year deal with a mutual option. I feel like that would have been ideal for them as well.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the Travis Bazzana thing before we get out of here. So I saw a couple tweets last week because of the prospect content that was coming out from all the outlets, and there was a lot of comparisons to Bobby Witt and Fernando Tatis and Alex Rodriguez, even about Connor Griffin, who Connor Griffin's a great prospect. Don't get me wrong. Like what he's done so far in the minors has been great. Everybody has him number one for a reason. There's a lot of excitement there. Everyone was talking about what Nick Kurtz did a year ago. And if you listen to the show long enough, you know, number one fan, Nick Kurtz, is sitting right here talking to the microphone right now. I'm not a member of the family, but they might as well invite me to Thanksgiving for all the hype I put him through, right? And I saw people saying, like, well, the Guardians have the number one pick, and they didn't pick the number one prospect in baseball, and they didn't pick the guy who was the rookie of the year last year, and instead they picked Travis Bazzana. I still can't believe we're sitting here on February 2nd, you know, less than 2 years since they drafted Travis Bazzana, and people are already giving up on him or saying they made the wrong pick. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, this is a guy who actually had a pretty good year by numbers last year in terms of like WRC plus, got on base, all that kind of stuff. And he was hurt twice. He had the oblique issue, and then he had, you know, another issue later in the year that kept him out at the end of the season. Guys, 86th percentile in barrel rate in AAA, okay? Exit velocity, you know, whatever. Not great. Maybe not his thing, but as long as you barrel the ball. Jose Ramirez has never been great exit velocity-wise. Takes a ton of walks. Doesn't miss. Has good speed. You know, and it by all accounts, does the most work of anybody to improve his game. This is a guy who, again, had a 138 WRC plus in AAA, and that was a quote-unquote down year after he battled injuries. He's fine. There are so many people out there who, you know, I know there's some people like Keith Law and others who are down on him, who always were down on him, but there's still a lot of people out there who are really smart and know what they're doing that are up on him that still think he's fine. Like, we don't have to make this decision right now that he's not the right guy. Like, will it be a bad pick? Well, we could find out. Like, it's possible, right? It may not work out the way we hoped, but I'm not ready to sit there and say that now. If anything, I still feel as good about him as I did the day they drafted him, to be honest with you. Like, I haven't seen anything other than maybe just being a little too passive at the plate. That's about it.
Yeah. And listen, I think Connor Griffin's a fantastic prospect, but it's very weird to be just in the general world of prospects, how quick we are to jump on a guy who hasn't faced upper advanced minors. Like, that's kind of one of those big red herring flags. Like, we've seen some guys really dominate a level, and I think he'll be fine, but like, it's weird to anoint anyone before they've really put some time with AA. I would say even just got up to AA.
Fair,
and we've also talked about Kurtz, where I think he's going to be a really good player, but I have a strong suspicion that last year is the greatest season he's ever going to have. That is the high point of his production, because I didn't get a chance to talk about this offseason. We've seen a lot of guys. Pete Alonso, highest WAR was his rookie year. Julio Rodriguez, rookie year. Adley Rutschman, rookie year. Players who break out like this, the league tends to adjust. He also carried an unreasonably high BABIP. And it was interesting when they released the list of players that Murakami was most like, and it's all of these guys who are kind of busts, and then Nick Kurtz. There's some data underneath his data that is not as positive with some of his swing decisions, as well as weirdly, he had really bad defense, which for a guy, my report on him coming out of college was actually, he was a good defender, but he was one of the bottom 3 defenders at first base this year by outs above average. So I have to see. So it's always interesting to rush to anoint anyone. Obviously, the year Kurtz had was fantastic. That's going to make people get up in arms. When someone like Griffin is getting the stuff he's had, that's coming up in arms. But let's also be really honest. Neither of those guys are really in the discussion for the first overall pick. Neither of them were in the discussion for the second overall pick. Neither of them were in the discussion for the third overall pick. These were guys who we weren't looking at until later on in the draft for a reason. You know, Connor Griffin had great tools, but he kind of moved around the diamond a bit, and he was playing against terrible competition. In the history of Mississippi prep players, you had Austin Riley and a bunch of busts. That hurts things. I mean, Cooper Pratt had come out of there maybe the year before, who's been a positive development. We're seeing, you know, Mississippi get better, but it was a really ugly list. And there was a lot of swing and miss in Connor Griffin's game, and I'm very curious to see how that translates. Nick Kurtz being a first baseman, that is the offensive guard of the baseball draft. That's just the truth of it. You were the high man on him. No one else thought he should go even fourth. Most people thought that he should not go in the top 5. You and I had him in the top 5 on our draft boards, and that made us stand out compared to everyone else. I don't think anyone else had Nick Kurtz top 5 at the time. A lot of people had
I would have taken
Montgomery.
him over Charlie Condon.
Yeah. I wouldn't have at the time, but that's the other point too. Like Condon's been really bad. Like there's no way around it. Condon's data isn't great. Jack, I know he had great numbers, but boy, did he get eviscerated at the major league level. And Chase Burns didn't look good at the major league level. Now you could also say, hey, Bazzana may not look good at the major league level when he gets there. But the point of fact is,
it's still too early for all of them.
It's too early. It's too early for
all of them. Even
all
Nick
of them.
Kurtz, it's still too early.
It's too early for all of these guys. It was a fantastic draft. You look at, I would have taken Kurtz or any of those other guys we talked about number 1 overall last year because of how bad the draft was the next year. Like, we haven't had the right year to pick one. And we know for a fact that if Cleveland hadn't taken Travis Bazzana 1, he was going 2.
It was
we know for a
Weatherholt
fact
too.
Yeah, if Cleveland had taken Weatherholt, which was their guy, that's honestly, if they hadn't taken Bazzana, they would have gone with Weatherholt, who's been great as well. And we haven't talked about him, and he's even, a lot of places, as higher ranked than Bazzana, and understandably so. But he always had soft tissue injuries in college, which was our concern there. He stayed healthy, and weirdly, Bazzana hasn't. So it's, the life of baseball. But yeah, it's that weird situation. And, if he has it this year, he stays healthy. Which, God, can we have a prospect stay healthy, please?
Deserve that much, don't we?
Yeah, it's
this offseason.
And if the data, there's still too much passivity, then I'm going to start to have big concerns. But like, I would never even do a redraft where I write those up until 4 or 5 years after, because so much can shift and change. There are guys who've been labeled busts who end up being pretty good players just because it took a little bit. So,
by the way, Jose Ramirez's first 500 at bats in the majors were not good.
They weren't. I mean, development isn't linear. We say it all the time. So I just think it's interesting. But I will say this: I feel like for a lot of people who hate on Bazzana, it just comes down to the fact that they didn't want a sub 6 foot second baseman. I understand second base is not a value position either. It's close to first base in terms of value, but they wanted the big power guys. And I'll say this, like outside of Kurtz, the big power guys are yet the Montgomerys, the Condons, even Tibbs, who I loved, is been passed over twice. So we'll have to see. Like patience. Like it's a long year. This is the sport. You have to have patience. This is not
Who's Fraba?
I'm missing this one. So comment below on what I don't understand.
That's the one you miss? Really? Yes. I guarantee commenters will get that one. I guarantee you.
It's the one I'm missing. But yeah, this is the sport. You got to have patience. I'm not going to sit here and hum some Guns N' Roses, but this is the sport in general. You have to have a little patience. Speaking of patience, we are going to be, hopefully you will be patient and download all of our shows this week, since we are back to 5 days a week.
Please, yes.
We'll be talking about things. We'll have a mailbag tomorrow. We're going to take some questions from our insiders. We're going to answer and talk and discuss, maybe get into some arguments as we tend to on the mailbag. And we've got some things coming down the pipe. We even had CBS reach out to us to maybe talk on one of their things. So that's a pretty cool recent development to kind of talk about some bona fides. But I'll peel back the curtain.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming up. We didn't get to the non-roster invitees. We didn't get to the Ralphie Velasquez and other guys. So we'll get into that later this week, since we focused on Bazzana in the last segment there. But yeah, mailbag tomorrow. We've got an interview we want to do here in the next week or so. We got to do our pitching prospect tool draft. We've got our prospect draft that we do annually anyway. We have some people who want to do the prospects outside the top 100. And I know there's some people out there who also want us to do a division rundown to see where the Guardians stand against the rest of the AL Central. So we'll do all that.
Yep. And we want to thank you all for joining us. Rate and review, download daily. It helps. We'll have to give out tomorrow a shout out for the new iTunes review. But thank you all for joining us, and go Guardians, go.